Greetings all. Thanks for joining us, those who are here physically in the building and those who will log in on Facebook Live or eventually on YouTube. We are continuing our study of the book of Job. We are in chapter 33. And as always, we invite you to, if you're in Western New York, to join us Wednesday nights. We're here at River Life Chapel at 6 o'clock. That's in Youngstown, New York, 3474 Creek Road. And if you don't have a home church and you're in Western New York, come out at 10:30 on Sunday mornings and join us at 10:30 again in Youngstown, River Life Chapel. So we've been studying the book of Job, and most weeks we've been lucky to do a chapter a week. Some weeks we've done less than a chapter. One chapter was so short we actually got two in 1 week. So we're doing all right. We're not in a big hurry. We're aiming for a chapter a week, but we'll see how it goes. We're okay if the Holy Spirit takes us into slightly different directions. Anyhow, we are in Job chapter 33. Quick overview. The first couple of chapters, God says Job's the best in all the world. He's the best of the best. Satan says he's only that good because you protect him. God gives Satan the authority to attack him and not to be punny, but all hell breaks loose. Job suffers the loss of family, possessions, his health, and then he suffers at the hands of his three friends, so-called. And now we're at Elihu, who is a very interesting character. We started him with Job 32, and we're continuing with the young guy, Elihu, however you pronounce it, has one of the lengthiest discourses in the book of Job. And so he's going to be an interesting character to look at. Basically, Elihu rebukes Job's friends for their baseless and false accusations, and rebukes Job for defending himself rather than letting God defend him. And so we're going to see very interesting this character here. Verses 1 through 7, Elihu says says he's sent to speak for God, which is very interesting in light of the fact that Job's other friends made the same claims, same types of claims. But God never rebukes in the end. Spoiler alert. God never rebukes Elihu, and almost all or a lot of what this guy says kind of rolls out the red carpet for when God comes on the scene. He pretty much says the same things. So, this is definitely going to be interesting. Does somebody, I have the King James, does somebody with another translation want to read the first 7 verses?
I can.
All right.
Now, Job, listen to my words. Pay attention to everything I say. I am about to open my mouth. My words are on the tip of my tongue. My words come from an upright heart. My lips sincerely speak what I know. The Spirit of God has made me. The breath of the Almighty gives me life. Answer me then if you can. Prepare yourself and confront me. I am just like you before God. I too have been taken from clay. No fear of me should alarm you, nor should my hand be heavy upon you.
All right. So,
New International.
Yep. So, basically, verse 1 and 2, he's saying, listen to everything I say, Job. It's interesting. Most of what Job's other friends, said most of it until the very end was indirectly accusing Job. They kind of said, evil people lose their children. They didn't say, for the most part, they didn't say, Job, you're the evil guy who lost their kids. They kind of made these sweeping generalizations where Elihu addresses Job directly and by name. He says, Job, I pray thee, hear my speeches and hearken to all my words. So he addresses Job directly, his other friends mostly avoided speaking directly with Job, ambiguous accusations like I just said. Excuse me. Behold, verse 2, I have opened my mouth, my tongue hath spoken in my mouth. So one of the commentators said mouth, rather palate, whereby the taste discerns. Every man speaks with his mouth, but few, as Elihu, try their words with discrimination first and only say what is really good. I will speak according, this is again from the commentator, I will speak according to my inward conviction, clearly, rather by definition, purely, sincerely, not distorting the truth through passion as Job's other friends did. So that's verse 3. My words shall be of the uprightness of my heart, and my lips shall utter knowledge clearly. So basically, Elihu's saying that he's tested, he's checked these things out, and is only speaking what he can verify. Whereas, so Job's friends, his other friends, said, you're suffering, so you're guilty. Elihu says, you're guilty of this specific thing and this specific thing and this specific thing, which are in line with what God says. So it's definitely, the other guys take Job's situation and says you're guilty of all these vile things, whereas Elihu responds to what Job himself has said in his own self-defense. So anyhow, different.
I was trying to think back when we just started. Is Elihu somebody Job knew?
It seems likely. I actually, as I was studying this, had conversations with my Hebrew scholar friend, and this is a very interesting character. There's some thoughts that because this is a book of poetry, some people see it written in different time frames. So some see some parts of it. My friend says some parts of it are written in such ancient Hebrew that it's clearly a very old book, and other parts are written in much more modern. And so the idea is that some of it was added later on. I don't get into all of that. I go with the Holy Spirit wrote it, and that's good enough for me. I'm not a scholar. I just study and believe what Scripture says. I mean, it's cool to get into some of that a little bit, but I don't want to miss the tree for the forest or the forest for the tree,
But did it say where this guy came from?
We looked at that last time. Yes, it does.
I'll look back.
Check out the YouTube. It did make it verse 30, chapter 32. It made it. So we did talk about his lineage according to chapter 32 and that. And so Yeah, you can pull that up from previous notes and YouTube.
In chapter 32, verse 2, but Elihu, son of Barachel, the Buzite of the family of Ram. So that's the family he came from.
And we looked into that. There's each one of those, I don't remember because I don't have the notes with me, but each one of those words, son of Barachel, the Buzite, kindred of Ram, these are all possible connections to either areas that he was from or people that he descended from. So it seems that he was a real person. Seems that he was there, from what he said there, listening to all their conversations. We talked about that in chapter 32. And because he was younger, he held his peace until they were all done talking. And now he's going to let them have it.
And he sounds pretty confident because he says, and pay attention to everything I say.
Yeah. Which is interesting as we get a little further. I'm not quite ready to go there yet, but as we get a little further into this, how could you get away with speaking the way he does and not having God rebuke and chastise you if you're not that? So, and I'm sure we'll get into that a little bit more as we go along. But the confidence is there. So, just as confident as I am saying we're saved by grace through faith in Jesus, Elihu seems to be that confident in his information that he got from God. All right, now I got it directly out of the Bible. Elihu didn't have that, So anyhow, he is very confident. He patiently listened to all the back and forth. It's clear with his response to the three, and now with his response to Job, it's clear that he was listening, paying attention. If they had pen and paper, he probably was taking notes. Well, maybe not. He was a young guy. He can remember things better than us old guys. Maybe he didn't need notes. I don't know. But anyhow, so basically he's saying, I've carefully, and he doesn't say it, but probably prayerfully considered what I'm going to say. Whereas you other bozos were shooting from the hip. That's the Bob paraphrase. You won't find that in the Bible. Although some translations do use the word stupid, I kind of like some of those a little less literal translations sometimes. But anyhow, so verse 4, the Spirit of God has made me, and the breath of the Almighty has given me life. We're going to start to look here. Some commentators believe Elihu was young and arrogant. This verse and others are used as example of his youthful pride. But as we go along, that's not my position.
Do you know why they would think that? Because I don't get it when just because he talks about the Spirit of God and the breath of the Almighty. It's like, what's so arrogant about that?
Well, it's like in the whole context. Listen to me, Job. I'm going to teach you wisdom. The Spirit of the Lord has made me, and I could see it. Some commentators do. One that I often lean towards, I kind of avoided this time. I still used them, but kind of avoided because I'm like, I'm not seeing that.
But then again, too, when he says, my words come from my upright heart.
Yeah.
My lips utter pure knowledge.
Yeah. It sounds like it. And in some of those ways, he actually sounds a bit like the other three. They were very confident in their counsel, but they appealed to other things, and God rebuked them. So one of them appealed to a spirit coming to him in a dream in the night. That was, I think, Eliphaz, and another one appealed to the wisdom of the aged. Another one appealed to personal experience. So, but he's saying the breath of the Almighty. He's appealing to God. It's, again, a little different. Sounds pretty arrogant.
The others seem like they all tried to pull Job down further than he was, but this guy seems, I don't know, at least a little bit what we read so far, he seems more like, listen, I'm going to help you.
Yeah.
Exactly. We're going to get there. That's exactly it. I mean, they all found fault with Job. The other three wrongly so. So, it's like it's like they went and saw a car wreck. And they said, oh, that driver was drunk and speeding and not paying attention and texting. What?
Yeah.
It's a car wreck. You don't know all that from the car wreck.
Yeah.
But that's what they did. They saw the car wreck, the train wreck of Job's life at that point, and said, you're a vile whoremonger, robber of the poor, abuser of people. What?
Whatever they could pull out of
anything that they thought they knew, they accused him of. Elihu says, Job, you're guilty of self-righteousness and defending yourself, which is exactly what God says when he comes on the scene. So this is definitely going to get interesting, if it's not already. So some commentators think that Elihu was young and arrogant. That's not where I sit. This verse and others are used as examples of his youthful pride. What I see, to begin with, is Elihu seems to be rolling out the red carpet for God. In a way, a little bit like John the Baptist rolling out the red carpet for Jesus. Why do I say that? Well, as we go along, we'll see. But basically, most of what Elihu says, God repeats or says it in a different way.
Wouldn't that be like encouraging to someone who's life?
That's a great observation. One of the things I had kind of said, and he says it again here, but I think last time in 32, but he also says it again here in 33. At some point, he says, "Answer me if you have an answer. Otherwise, listen to me." I think it's the end of the chapter, and Job doesn't. He's given the opportunity to interject, which he boldly took with all of his other three friends every time, and he doesn't say anything here. So I'm thinking, just my thought, Elihu was making some sense to Job, and Job was actually listening.
Or at least not accusatory.
Yeah. I mean, and what Elihu did accuse him of, Job probably thought, well, he might be right, So I can see Job pondering what this guy is saying, whereas the other guys are like, Job was like, take a breath, man, I'm jumping in, So Elihu takes a breath and invites him to speak, and he doesn't, I think Elihu was a good guy. Verse 5. Oh, right here is one of them. If you can answer me, set your words in order before me. Stand up. Stand up is an allusion to court proceeding. Elihu believes God sent him as a partial answer to Job. In Job 30:20, I cry unto thee, and thou dost not hear me. I stand up, and thou regardest me not. And so the next verse, I think, verse 6, Elihu says, behold, I am according to thy wish in God's stead. I also am formed out of the clay. So Elihu is believing and stating, you wanted someone I'm him. You wanted someone to stand and plead your case and to act as an intermediary between you and God. We talked about that. So since we're there, I'm wondering. I'm currently at one of three places. Either Elihu is speaking prophetically, which my Hebrew scholar friend says that's definitely a possibility, the way the wording is, especially these passages. The Spirit of God has made me, the breath of the Almighty has given me. So some of the way that's worded indicates a prophetic speaking, and the prophets are very straightforward. So he could be prophetic. I'm kind of myself leaning that Elihu is a type of Christ. Job pleads for a mediator. Elihu says, I'm him. And then possibly, I'm not convinced of this one yet, but possibly, maybe, just food for thought, Elihu was a Christophany, which a Christophany is a pre-incarnate appearance of Jesus. So like, Melchizedek would be the most famous one. The three, Abraham with the three angels, and one of them the angel of the Lord. Joshua with the captain of the hosts. Those are very commonly believed to be Christophanies. I had never thought of Elihu before as a possibility. At this point, I'm inclined to lean towards being a type of Christ, largely because of his lineage, which is given, things like that. But minimally, I would say he's definitely speaking prophetically. So I'm definitely on the other side of the spectrum from those who think he's a young, arrogant upstart.
Are you thinking that he was sent by God ahead of himself?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. As we go along, I'm not that far ahead, but somehow in the back of my mind, I'm remembering Elihu says something about a whirlwind, and then the next thing you know, God's coming in out of the whirlwind. So it seems that he really is rolling out the red carpet for God, which would be also a type of Christ, because, Jesus is the red carpet for us to get into the presence of God. Right. So I can see the typology. I can see it pretty clearly, which probably before studying for tonight I didn't. Which is so cool, because every time I read the Bible I get something new out of it. Yes. I think he's a type of Christ. Job cries out for that umpire, that mediator. Elihu says, that's me. This verse 6, behold, I am according to thy wish in God's stead. I am, but then he says, I'm formed out of clay. So I'm no better than you, Job. He humbles himself. You want somebody to stand between you and God? That's me. God sent me. But I'm just clay, like made from clay like you. So,
and in verse 7, it really sounds like he's trying to say, I'm not like your other three friends. Yep. So let me look at my notes here from verse 6 and 7. Formed of clay, it's a different word from the dust of the earth that Adam was formed from, but possibly a reference to the creation account. Even though Elihu was speaking on behalf of God, he says that he's nothing but clay. So he's confident in his calling, but he's also humble. I'm nothing, Job. I'm speaking on behalf of God. I've studied this. I've prayed about it. I've discerned it. I'm not just shooting from the hip. But I'm nothing. I'm clay, and you can see that from last chapter when he says, you guys are all older than me. I just sat quiet and waited for you to finish.
Not that we have any problems these days with young people respecting their elders. That's not an issue that we have anymore.
Certainly not.
Of course. Read sarcasm in there if you're watching live or on recording. Unlike Job's other friends, Elihu says he will not assault and terrify Job. Elihu's hand will not be against Job. He's addressing Job's words from Job 13:21, where Job says, "Withdraw thy hand far from me, and let not thy dread make me afraid." So that's 20 chapters ago by our standards. Who knows how long into the conversation, days, hours, minutes, who knows how long after that Job said that, Elihu he's referring to it. So, behold, my terror shall not make thee afraid, neither shall my hand be heavy upon thee. He's like, Job, I'm not here to blast you. I'm not here to blast you. I'm just here to do what you asked for. So, with Job being how he is, I'm thinking he's sitting and listening. So verses 8 through 11, Elihu confronts Job's actual sins, not things he made up in his own mind. Verse 8, surely thou hast spoken in my hearing, and I have heard the voice of thy words. So I've listened to you, Job, and you were saying, I am clean without transgression. I am innocent, neither is there iniquity in me. Behold, he finds occasion against me. He counts me for his enemy. He puts my feet in the stocks. He marks all my paths. So that's verses 8 through 11. Elihu has listened patiently to Job's word, and Job has gone too far. All right? Job was right in regards to the accusations of his friends. They accused him of robbing the poor. Hey, you're a liar. I never did. So Job was right in that.
He did the opposite.
What? Yeah, he did. Exactly. He did the opposite of what they were accusing him of. And so, but Elihu is saying, I heard you, Job. You went too far. And that seems to be in line with what God says when he comes on the scene. So Job was guilty of self-righteousness and self-defense. One of the commentators said he went too far on the opposite side in opposing the friend's false charge of hypocrisy. So that's what one of the commentators said. And that's basically what it seems Elihu is saying. Job, I heard you. You went too far. Yeah, you're not what they said you were, and you were right in that you were not that, but you went a little too far. So Elihu points to, verse 9, points to Job's repeated claims of innocence. While Job made no claim of being sinless, he did speak that which God spoke about him, which essentially was Job was the best. He was blameless and upright. That's what God said about him. And Job was essentially agreeing with God, but defending himself. So he was not wrong in what he said. He was wrong in not letting God take care of it. Then verse 10, Elihu correctly assesses that at times Job felt as though God were his enemy and against him, which Job did say different times. Elihu again recounts Job's accusations about God. God imprisons and carefully watches Job. So he's recounting things that Job said. In the past we studied, Job had said, he's hedged me about, he's trapped me, he's ensnared me, he's against me, he brings an army against me. So Elihu's saying, Job, you said all this stuff, and you're a little over the top on some of this. Again, a Bob paraphrase. So he's confronting Job's actual sin. Job's friends, other friends said, Job, you're a vile, disgusting idiot. You've done all these horrible things. And Elihu says, Job, you're a self-righteous self-defender. Let God take care of it. Big difference. What Elihu said was true. What Job's other friends said was fairy tales. Made up, and one of them got it from a spirit. Which God said the guy was wrong. So, probably not a good idea to listen to Job's other three guys because God pretty sharply rebukes them. So verses 12 through 18, God may have already spoken to you, Job. He's not silent. Verse 12, behold, in this you are not just. I will answer thee that God is greater than a man. Verse 13, why do you strive against him? For he gives not account of any of his matters. So one of the commentators, it cannot be that God should jealously watch man, though spotless, as an enemy, or as one afraid of him as an equal. For God is greater than man. There must be sin in man, even though he be no hypocrite, which needs correction by suffering for the sufferer's good. So that's one of the commentators. Basically, he's saying that no one is sinless. And so it says there must be sin in man, even though he's no hypocrite. So he's acknowledging Job was not what those guys said, but he wasn't sinless. And then the commentator said, which needs correction by suffering for the sufferer's good. And we've repeatedly said throughout the whole study, different times, at the beginning, God says Job was the best of the best. At the end, Job says, whoa, I knew you before by the hearing of my ear, but now I see you. So Job is better at the end than he was at the beginning. And at the beginning, he was the best in all the world at the time. And that's what God is working out of all this. And so Elihu is saying, Job, God's in charge. No, I got this. This is no fun. I see, I've been sitting here, I've been watching, I've been listening. I know you're not having any fun. But God's in control, like you've said, Job. And he's working this out to make you better. And that's more or less what that commentator is saying. He did it. He's suffering for the sufferer's good. Maybe a New Testament parallel would be tribulation worketh patience. This is why I never pray for patience.
Been there, done that.
I know what creates patience, so I'm like, okay, God, you know what I need. I'm not going to ask for that one. If you know I need it, I'm not going to reject it, hopefully, but I'm not praying for that.
This
go ahead.
Kind of a side note. We need to go through suffering to learn patience and everything else. But God, he is a God of patience, but he doesn't have to go through anything because he's already got it. And his patience, his long suffering goes on and on and on. But we want to become Christ-like, and God, he has taken on that responsibility to get us there, to that place. We can't do it ourselves, but we do have to go through whatever he puts before us.
Yeah, and quite honestly, I almost hate to say it, but it should be our desire. What did Paul say? Oh, that I might know him. And the power of his resurrection. So far, I'm good with that. And the fellowship of his suffering. Whoop, couldn't we have just stopped before that? Oh, and one more, even being made conformable unto his death. Now that's how much we should want to get to know God. And Job didn't have a choice in the matter, but that's what God's doing in Job's life. And that's what Elihu is saying. Job, this is for your good. I know you don't believe it now. Listen to me. You're going to learn. And if my words aren't good enough, God's coming later. No, he didn't say that. He didn't say that.
I think too, that what I get from this is that we as, followers of God, we still have this tendency within us to have to explain ourselves, to fill people in. Oh yeah, we're doing all of this the right way, but you still don't get it. So I got to explain to you. And God says, stop that. You don't do that. Even if you don't say anything, I will do what I'm doing, and I don't need you to explain to other people, because they're not ever going to get it anyways unless they become spiritually minded. And it's harder for us to be quiet and leave that part to God.
So you're saying we all have a little bit of Job in us.
I think so.
Yeah, and actually,
And kind of the negative part that's being
I
pointed out.
almost think, I don't know if I wrote that down, but I almost think that somewhere in my studies that came up that we all got a little bit of Job in us. So,
Hopefully it's the beginning.
yeah, that would be good. So basically, Elihu is saying, God is awesome, and he's improving you through suffering. That's essential.
And really, we are like Job, and unless we go through suffering, we're not going to be, to that place that God is wanting to do. That's what the suffering is for.
Acts 14, somewhere, it's either, I think it's 22 or maybe 12, says something, we must through much tribulation enter into the kingdom of heaven. And for whatever that's worth, that one never makes it on the promise calendars. I'm just saying, one of these days I keep threatening I'm going to write a promise calendar full of verses that no one puts on a promise calendar. But, so I probably never.
Jesus himself said it, you will have children.
Yep. Probably won't ever do it, but
And if
I
the
could
world-
fill it.
And if the world hated him,
Yeah.
You're gonna hate us.
he's going to hate us.
Yeah. So verse 13, why do you strive against him? For he gives not account for any of his matters. His matters, I looked that up, and the one commentator says it's ways. Our part is not to strive with God, but to submit. To believe it is right because he does it, not because we see all the reasons for his doing it. So basically, that's what he's saying. What's your point, Job? Why are you striving against him? He doesn't give an account to anyone, regarding his matters. So Job is kind of being directed back to where Job was at the beginning and further ahead. At the beginning, Job's like, the Lord gave and the Lord took away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Now that's submitting to God, But as he went along, he was like, why are you striving against God? And then verse 14, for God speaks once, yes, twice, yet man doesn't perceive it. 15, in a dream, a vision of the night, when deep sleep falls upon men in the slumbering of the bed. So Elihu implies that God has spoken his corrections to Job, and Job hasn't heard it. Difficult situations can open our ears to hear God. Elihu, perhaps God has spoken to you, Job, in a dream or a vision, but you did not listen. And then my thoughts are, how often do we hear from God and don't listen? How often do we need to learn the hard way? Unfortunately, it's like our kids. I mean, I have a past. We all have a past, but mine was kind of rough. And nothing I would very little I would like better than for my kids to avoid learning things the way I did, the hard way. Glad I learned them, but still, I wish I would have learned them the easy way instead of the hard way. Well, that's basically what's being said here, is how often do we hear from God and don't listen? How often do we hear from God and don't even know we heard from him? I won't go there.
It's like laying in bed before you go to sleep, and you're thinking about your day, and you're thinking about all the negative things that just happened to you all night or all day long, instead of being grateful and praying before you go to bed, and maybe then you would have hearing for the Lord instead of
Yeah, we have not because we ask not.
It's attitude.
Definitely.
Like it's what our attitude is. Is it humble or is it prideful? We're not going to hear God if we've got pride.
Yeah, for sure. So then verse 16, then he opens the ears of men and seals their instruction. What's the NIV say? Or a different...
He may speak in their ears and terrify them with warnings.
Yeah, that was the other one. Same Hebrew, just Old English versus newer English. So basically, what that is with the sureness and secrecy of a seal, he reveals his warnings. God sometimes terrifies people, and dire circumstances enables them to seek and hear God.
And really, when God does that, even though what is visible to us, all this terrifying, all these warnings, but God is doing that in his mercy.
Yep.
He's doing, because otherwise we would not come out from what we're doing.
Yep. That's kind of what verse 17 says, that he may withdraw man from his purpose and hide pride from man. Basically, this is for your own good. God is turning Job from his deeds and the pride and self-defense. This is in line with God's words to Job that we'll see starting in chapter 38. So basically, this terrifying, this horrible circumstance, as was said different times already, is for your own good. It's going to make you better, Job.
And that's not just humoring us or trying to just pacify us. No, it's true. It's true. In God's goodness and his love and his mercy, in all of these wonderful things about God, he says, I know better. I know what you need, and I will do it however I need to do it. Because, even children are all different in one family. One needs a firm hand on them. Another, you just give them a look and they're terrified. Or another one is just so soft. But then later on in life, all of a sudden they get hard, whatever. But God knows each person, and he, in his great love, because he is Lord and Master, and it's not with the emphasis, I'm the Lord and you are my servant, and I'm the master and you're the slave. Even though that's true, we are slaves to Christ. But God, he says, I own you. And I feel very responsible, and I feel very caring, and I will provide, and I care about your well-being, and I will show it to you all the days of your life.
Like a good parent.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
like our Heavenly Father, like no other father could do.
Right.
But that's the attitude he has. He doesn't, yes, we are slaves to him, and we are his servants, but he more so is Lord and Master, like he cares for every aspect of our life, and he has no sense of you deserve what you get, or you deserve great punishment. No, he says, I feel responsible, and I will bring you to where I want you to go.
Yeah, it says he doesn't take pleasure in the death of the wicked. So, yeah, I mean, God's not into sending people to hell. You send yourself.
Send yourself.
You know, He takes no pleasure in the death of the wicked. You know, so, but yeah, so verse 18 kind of echoes what Eldina just said. He keeps back his soul from the pit and his life from perishing by the sword. Basically, God is speaking to you, Job, in this calamity. He is mercifully exposing your sin, not what your friends said, with the goal of saving you from getting worse and making you better. So, keeps you back from the pit and his life from perishing by the sword. You know, so it's all for your good, Job. It's all for your good. Yeah, so he's definitely got a different tone than the other three guys. So verses 19 through 28, God spoke in your sufferings to deliver you. He is chastened also with pain upon his bed, and the multitude of his bones with strong pain. So that in verse 20, so that his life abhorreth bread, and his soul dainty meat. So verse 19, one of the commentators, when man does not heed the warnings of the night, he is chastened. The new thought suggested by Elihu is that affliction is disciplinary for the good of the godly. Elihu is describing what Job is suffering and saying it is God trying to get his attention. So, in verse 20, so that his life abhorreth bread and his soul dainty meat, the commentary on that. Life taking away the desire of food by sickness symbolizes the removal of affliction of lust for things which foster the spiritual fever of pride. So this is why I sometimes avoid commentators, because they're like, what are you talking about? But basically, in a nutshell, what he's saying is this affliction is dealing with your pride, Job. You know, you are all that what you said, but you should not have said it and should not be thinking it. You know, God says you're the best of the best. So this idea, this actually speaks to me, and this idea that we need to say of ourselves what God says of us is semi-true. I think probably a better position is to say of ourselves what God says we ought to say of ourselves.
Yeah, like for instance, I pray a prayer and God has honored it. I didn't know that he would, but I guess I was saying it the right way, and my heart was, and so I would say, I don't say, oh Lord, help me to see that the way you do. Well, that sounds good, that sounds spiritual. Like, we can never see things the way God, but I say, Lord, help me to see this the way you want me to see it.
Yeah.
And God has responded to that. And it's not that he's technical about words. No, but as we grow in the Lord, we should become more and more aware of these things.
He's technical about attitudes. So God says we're his children by the spirit of adoption. So I've heard some people, not a lot, but some people say, we're God's kids. Well, there's an attitude problem right there. What Jesus said when he talks about the parable, he says, or what master has a servant who works out in the field, comes into the house, and the master says, oh, you've been working so hard, sit down, eat, relax. No, the master says, prepare my meal, get things ready for me, and then after I've eaten, you'll eat. And then when the parable's done, Jesus says, he doesn't applaud him for doing what he's told to do. And then Jesus says, so you also ought to say of yourselves, because There's no above and beyond the call of duty in God. The best we can do is what we're expected to do. God's not going around giving attaboys because you did what you're supposed to do.
We do that for ourselves.
We do that for ourselves, and it's okay. There is other scripture. Don't let your praise come. This applies to Job. Don't let your praise come from your own mouth. Let it come from the lips of another. So when God says you're the best of the best, that's cool. When Job says I'm the best of the best, that's not cool. And this is what Elihu is getting at.
I just want to say something. With whatever Elihu is going to be saying, and this connection with how Job has moved from doing righteously, but now defending himself in front of his so-called friends, it's kind of like as if God says, my way is not that way. Because if you defend yourself, then you've left nothing for me to do. And I do it so differently. And I do it for my glory. So I want you to learn that is not my kingdom's way. And this is one of the hardest things that we, should not do. And because we spoil it for ourselves.
Yeah.
But it's seemingly like even other people would say, you've got every right to speak that way, and you're such a saint, and blah, blah, blah. But no, we are to not be that way, because Jesus didn't defend himself, but if he did, in the context of whatever it is, applies. But that's something I've got to learn.
Yeah. So 21 and 22, his flesh is consumed away, it cannot be seen, and his bones that were not seen stick out. Yes, his soul draws near unto the grave, and his life to the destroyers. So basically, verse 21, Job was once healthy and prominent. Now his bones stick out. Basically, probably a commentary on how emaciated he is due to everything he's going through, which included lack of hunger and boils and everything. And then 22, Job is drawing near to death and to the destroyers. Commentator, destroyers, angels of death commissioned by God to end man's life, or possibly the death pains personified may, however, be meant so as gnawers, those gnawing on. So it could be referencing angels of death, or this commentator, which I think I tend to agree with, it's more the death pains personified and gnawing away at Job. Either way, it's not a good thing. Then in 23, it starts kind of getting a little cool here. 23, if there be a messenger with him, an interpreter, one among 1,000 to show unto man his uprightness. I'll read 24. Let's do one verse here at a time. This is so basically, Elihu refers to himself as the divinely sent messenger, the interpreter, to explain to Job and vindicate God's righteousness, which is in stark contrast to the destroyers mentioned in the verse previously. So some have indicated that Elihu might be a type of Christ, possibly a Christophany, which we talked about a little bit before. He is an intermediary between Job and God, says much the same as what God says. So in Job 9:33, if only there were someone to mediate between us, someone to bring us together. And then Job 33:6, earlier this chapter, behold, I am according to thy wish in God's stead. I am formed out of the clay. So if Elihu is not a type of Christ, minimally he's speaking prophetically. And I get that kind of, we talked about from verse 4, the Spirit of God has made me, and the breath of the Almighty gives me life. So Elihu describes, verse 24, Elihu describes the messenger. As we look at this description, contemplate possible typology of Christ. So he says in verse 24, and he is merciful to him, and says, deliver him from going down into the pit. I have found a ransom. Sounds a little bit like Christ to me.
Yeah.
He is gracious unto him. He says, deliver him from going down to the pit. I have found a ransom, and the read-along translation, an atonement. All right. Ransom. Christ is our ransom. He's the atonement for our sins. So I definitely lean towards him being a type of Christ. This go-between that Job wanted. And minimally a type of Christ, at least speaking prophetically. 25. An effect of the ransom. His flesh shall be fresher than a child's. He shall return to the days of his youth. So one of the effects of the ransom is restoration of his health and youthful strength. Isn't that what happened? Isn't that what happened to Job after God addresses him? Job is restored and has 10 more children. Sounds like youthful vigor is restored to me. I mean, that doesn't count the 10 he had before that were killed. Now he's got 10 more. I mean, it sounds like it to me. I'm just saying. So that's one of the results of this ransom, this restoration. 26 is more ransom effects. Then man prays to God, and he accepts him. He sees his face with a shout of joy, and he restores to man his righteousness. Again, sounds like our relationship to Christ to me. He shall pray unto God, and he will be favorable unto him. Well, if we pray to God according to his will, according to receiving Jesus, we're going to be in God's favor. We're receiving his grace. And he will see his face with joy. And he will render unto man his righteousness. I think he will render unto man his righteousness is not restoring the righteousness Job had before. To me, it's prophetic of rendering God's righteousness to us, which is what happens in the New Testament. We are made the righteousness of God in Christ Jesus.
My translation is a little bit different. I'm thinking I like what you've guys got. Verse 26, is that where you're at? At the
Yep.
end there?
Yep.
The last phrase, he will restore them to full well-being.
Yeah, and I like the righteousness
Is that
translation.
what you have?
No, I have the New King James, and it is, for he restores to man his righteousness.
Yeah.
Okay, what do you have,
NIV.
Elizabeth?
I thought I had the same as yours, but it says he is restored by God to his righteous state.
Yeah, you got the NIV. I thought you had the NIV too. But
Uh,
so I think it's his righteousness that it's obviously his righteousness.
Capital H.
Capital H.
And then, so the old King James doesn't have the old King.
On that. Oh, yeah.
That's a translation thing. The old King James does not have the capital H, but that's a translation thing, and I think it's accurately translated. Because he's not restoring the righteousness Job had before; he's making him better.
Right.
And so I think that's that with that. And verses 27 and 28, He looks upon men, and if any say, I have sinned and perverted that which was right, and it profited me not, he will deliver his soul from going into the pit, and his life shall see light again. Basically, the man, Job, if the man, Job, repents and acknowledges his sin, he blesses God for mercy, he praises God for his redemption, and rejoices that his life will look on the light again. So that's the end result of this ransom and restoration that we've been talking about. There is joy, New Testament joy unspeakable and full of glory. I mean, so the end of the chapter, which I didn't think we were going to get to, we're a little over, but that's okay. 29 through 33, basically Elihu begs Job to listen to him. 29 and 30, Lo, all these things worketh God oftentimes with man, to bring back his soul from the pit, to be enlightened with the light of the living. So a commentator, twice and thrice, alluding to Job 33:14, once by wisdom, once by visions, secondly by afflictions, and now thirdly by the messenger. So God has spoken to Job multiple times, and this phrase, once and twice, or twice and thrice, or whatever, it's interesting because near the end of the book, when God's speaking, God says, answer me, Job. And Job says, I've opened my mouth once, and yes, I have opened it a second time, but now I'm shutting up. Again, that's the Bob paraphrase. Read it for yourself. I think it's chapter 40. So yeah, basically, that's what that seems to be referencing. And then 31 through 33, pay attention to what I am saying, Job. Answer me if you have anything to say. If not, be silent and listen and learn wisdom. So Elihu's not done. Like I said, he's got the longest straight up discourse in the whole book. 32 through 37 chapters, and we're just on 33. So more to come. But to me, one of the coolest things out of this chapter is the possibility of Elihu being a type of Christ. And the controversy, which makes sense to me because there was controversy amongst Jesus. John 7:12. And there was much murmuring among the people concerning him. For some said, he is a good man. Others said, no, he's deceiving the people. So I guess if Elihu is a type of Christ, it's maybe not a surprise that there would be, conflict. Yeah. I'm just saying. That to me is probably the coolest thing that I get out of this chapter is the typology of Christ that Elihu presents, and more to come. We got a few more chapters of Elihu before God comes on the scene, and we're good. All right, thanks for tuning in. Lord willing, we'll see you next week, or if you watch on YouTube, next month, year, whatever. Take care.